You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. Once again, we are here today. Today, we have our special guest today with us. His name is Willie Handler. He has lived multiple lives, and one from hospital administrator to government policy expert to published author, and also an active voice in the Holocaust survivor community. Willie is someone that is going to share not just amazing stories, but also his life journey. I want to say to you, we appreciate you taking time talking to us today. We're going to also get into your book, Out from the Shadows. But before we do that, I want to welcome you to the show and say, man, how you doing?
Thank you very much. Nice being here.
We had to make it happen. It had a lot of battles trying to get our interview done. So
right.
It must be a powerful story that we're about to hear. So let's start your personal life before we get into your book. Tell us a little bit some of the things that you do now. People know that you are an active Holocaust survivor, activist in the community.
Okay. Well, I'm active in the sort of the descendant community, survivor community is kind of dwindling off. I'm a volunteer at the Toronto Holocaust Museum, and it's been time showing around school children because that's our predominant client. I have an active blog on Substack where I write on all kinds of Holocaust-related issues. I've done a lot of speaking, especially around Holocaust Remembrance Day, and in fact, I'm doing a program later this year on Holocaust Holocaust Education Week in Toronto, where I'm going to be doing a program on Holocaust denial. So it's a lot of different things going on, including another book about the Holocaust. Yeah, Out from the Shadows actually came out November of 2024.
Okay.
And so that's my memoir, but it deals with also the history of my family, and it's written for. I wrote it for non-Jewish people, so it kind of tells us my family story while telling the story about the Holocaust, and sort of like seamlessly kind of moves in that way. So it helps people who haven't, are aware about the Holocaust but don't know a lot about it. So it's very informative, but it also talks about my childhood and the kind of trauma I experienced growing up. My next book, which is, I think, is called The Hidden Victim, and it is about trauma experienced by descendants of Holocaust survivors, but not myself, but other people. And I've interviewed 100 people for the book, and I'm about halfway through.
You've been able to speak at different schools, museums, and other events. What kind of reactions have you received from students or a visitor that has stuck with you?
Well, I'd say that it's really, the museum doesn't delve heavily into the Holocaust. It's very much like an overview, and it's really there's not a lot of graphic material there because it's really geared towards students, and so for many it's a bit of an eye opener, and for a lot of students, some maybe don't care that much because students are, students and what they're interested. But some, it kind of generates sort of an interest in that historical period and a search for more information.
This is Refocused Radio, talking to our guest today, Willie Handler. Go to his website, williehandler.com. When you think about you wearing multiple hats and in retirement, you said, well, I'm a keep writing. I'm published books. What has been your favorite process from not just getting out there, but receiving actual feedback of your writing? What's your favorite part of just being able to soak it all in?
It's kind of a strange experience for me. I worked in government where I had relatively important positions, but you're kind of in the background. You're not in the spotlight, and because you're a bureaucrat, and suddenly you begin to publish books, and people are reaching out to you. And the most unusual thing happened to me that earlier this year I was with friends for lunch at some deli. And this person comes running up to me and holds up his phone, and there's a photo of me. He says, "Is this you?" Sort of that, I'm constantly getting messages from people. I read your book and I was really moved, and I just wanted to tell you things like that. So it's very different. It's something sort of to get used to.
What do you believe is the biggest difference for you between writing fiction and writing nonfiction, like your memoir?
Well, the interesting thing, of course, is what my career, during my professional career, I did an awful lot of writing. It was all nonfiction. It's supposed to be nonfiction, but it was government. So maybe sometimes we embellished. And so, I took a stab at writing fiction, and I kind of flourished at that. And I just thought it was the right time for me to tell my family story. And so I approached it kind of the same way I was writing a novel, but it didn't work out that way because you're dealing with a real story, and you can't kind of divert from the truth. And so I became very much obsessed with being accurate. And that's a fundamental difference. And still to this day, it's been out for 8 or 9 months, and I still worry about maybe there's something that's factually not right in there. But I certainly did due diligence. That's a big difference. Well, and the other, of course, is because it's not just a nonfiction book, it's a nonfiction book about me. And that's very, very different. And, the whole idea of opening up and telling your inner secrets and your feelings and emotions and things like that, so different. So very, very different.
And speaking on that's an interesting thought, because I can only imagine did you have any times when you're writing the process and you're like, oh, we're not going there, I'm going to shut the lid on that one? Or did you just let it all out?
It was a gradual process. I remember the first time I showed the book to someone. It was an editor, and he came back and he said, I thought you were writing a memoir. He says, well, what do you mean? And he goes, well, this reads like a biography, but not quite a memoir. And so I took it back and I did some kind of heavy thinking and started editing and inserting myself more in it. And it took really several drafts until I fully opened up. And did I 100% open up? Pretty, maybe 95%. I guess there are probably things that I wasn't prepared to talk about in the book, but not very many at the end of the day.
And for our audience, I know we're only 10 minutes in, but before we get too deep into the weeds, let's talk a little bit about your parents. What were some of your earliest memories growing up with your parents who were Holocaust survivors?
Yes. So I've known, I feel I've known about the Holocaust my whole life, partly because it's probably partly genetics, and I just about hearing about it. My earliest memory, it's like you don't have one, because it seems like I've always known about it. Though it's quite interesting, my father did talk about it, but not in a great detail and not all together, more in bits and pieces, because he was so traumatized, he had really difficulty speaking about it. But he would raise it at times for one, perhaps to make a point or something like that. But if you sort of tried to press him and ask questions, he would just, he would get very emotional and just kind of break down. And so my mother was not like that. So one of the things you kind of learn as a child is don't ask, because you don't want to cause pain to your parent. And so you never really ask questions. But I always knew about the Holocaust, read so many books about World War II and the Holocaust. So I was always totally aware, even at a very young age.
When you think about trauma in the community of others who have had parents who were in a Holocaust survivor, are there ways that you see that you all talk about that? Because that's a heavy thing to discuss, as far as how people who survive, how to deal with trauma afterwards.
So I interviewed 100 people, and they were all either children or grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, and everybody's story was different. How they reacted was different, but there were very common threads. And one is the parents who were survivors, even if they were open about it, and I think the majority were not, those that did were very careful in what they told their children, more to protect them. But, and that's why some of them didn't talk about it at all, but as well also to protect themselves, because it was so triggering and traumatizing for them. And then what I observed is that as they got older, survivors, and near the end of life, they would start opening up. And I guess part of it is this distance from the events and the trauma, but as well, I think there was this realization that they needed to get their story out or it would be lost. And so there was a flurry of a lot of memoirs being written by survivors later in their life. To be honest, they were also very focused early on in their life in restoring their life and making a living and raising families and things like that. So the Holocaust was kind of like pushed in the background. I know in Toronto, it was in 1985 that a bunch of survivors got together and decided to build and collect money to build a Holocaust center. And that's 40 years after the end of the war. And that's when this group of survivors began talking about it. And so, and that's, I think, very reflective of the community. As far as the children go, they didn't talk about it either. When they were growing up, they didn't talk about it with their friends. even if their friends were also other children's survivors. It wasn't so much as a taboo subject. It was just too uncomfortable.
Once again, listening to Refocus Radio and watching us online and talking to our guest today, Willie Handler. You go to his website, williehandler.com. My next question before we wrap up for today is when you think about the role of education and storytelling, how do you believe that can play in fighting against ignorance and hate?
I think it's almost a losing battle right now, the way the world is, and it seems to be more hate than ever. Part of it is our education system, and also it's the role of the internet and how people get information. I don't know how many people are actually reading history books these days. It seems like not too many. And people are more interested in learning from YouTube or TikTok video than from historical books and things like that. And so reaching people needs kind of a different strategy. And I think sort of the anti-hate community, and that's not just Jewish people, but other races and other groups that are discriminated against, they need to find better strategies to reach people and make them understand and pass on the truth. And so far, I think we're not doing well enough. And I'm very much against hate. I don't hate people. I don't hate groups. And I try and listen to people. And if they're open and they're open-minded, then I will tell them my perspective. If they're not, then you're wasting your time. But it's a real struggle these days, and becoming more and more so. And I don't have all the answers, but I think that community leaders, politicians, religious leaders, whoever, need to get together and find a better way.
If someone listening to this and watching us, what would you hope the future would look like if that could happen? I mean, it seems like we talk about this on and on and on, but what do you think people can do to actually step up and be that mirror of working together?
Well, I think it's just about listening to people, and there is not and there's different kinds of hate too, but I'm at times a sort of a loss as well, but people need to listen to each other and understand where they're coming from and be more tolerant of people who are different than them. And this is a big planet with over 8 billion people now, and we are not so... People are sometimes asking too tribal, but we're not tribes anymore. It's a big, the world itself is a big melting pot, and people traveling around the world, many people, and seeing different cultures. You need to be much more open-minded, and that's kind of the world that I want to see. That listens, that's open-minded, that's not afraid of people who are different than them, and welcome them, and try to share perspectives. And I hope one day we can be there, but it's not happening yet.
And my last question would be for you is, with that said, and with the resources you have available for the public with your books, what do you hope your books can accomplish and towards that goal of not just educating, but informing people what most likely they ignored or just wasn't aware of?
Well, so my family story or other family stories really illustrate well how hate can happen and how damaging it can be to humanity. And so, in a very plain way, I've described it in my books about how it happened and the impact it had and why we need to step back and make sure it doesn't happen again. And my style of writing is such that it's not going to, it's very digestible. And I do that on purpose. I learned that as a bureaucrat, how to write non-bureaucraties, and actually because I was doing writing for the outside world, and I continue to do that so that people will get the message and will finish what I write.
I know I said last question, but I'm gonna squeeze one more.
Yeah, it's okay.
As an accomplished writer and published author, what will you give words of wisdom to any author out there who feels like maybe they've been in the game for a while and they just, want to teach something, or they're a newbie and they don't know where to start? Based on your personal experience, getting your work out there, what would you share with our listening viewers with something that they can take away from your experience?
Well, one thing I can say is that the only way to learn how to be a good writer is to keep writing. That I started off as not a very good writer, and it just got better and better and better. It never stops getting better. And so that's an important thing for people to understand, is that, and if they're getting negative feedback about their writing, don't give up. Go back and rewrite, and you will get better. And listen to people and read, because reading good material teaches you how to structure your writing properly and to describe things and so on and so forth. So that's an important thing. But because I switched from fiction to nonfiction, if you're into nonfiction, even in fiction a little bit, but not to the same extent, you really have to do your homework. You have to do a lot of research. And that's an important aspect of writing, is that even if you're writing fiction, if you want some realism, and I give an example. I wrote a book about dairy farming, and a dairy farmer who decided to switch to growing marijuana. So I basically had to do all this research on how to run a dairy farm as well as the other part of it. And I remember once getting a feedback from somebody who says, I grew up on a dairy farm, and I read your book, and it's obvious that you did as well. And that's probably the biggest compliment you could get, because I basically spent a half a day on a dairy farm.
Well, that's awesome. We appreciate you being on the show today. We got it done. It was a battle to get this done. I'm glad we did, because it's always worth the wait. And I want to say to you, thank you for your time being on the show today, man.
Thank you very much. I know technology was not cooperating with us.
That's the powerful tools of editing, man. But appreciate your time as always, man. You have a good one.
Well, thank you very much. It was my pleasure.